Hello, I'm Ryan Cook, and this is Civic Tech Chat, a podcast about the civic technology movement. We seek to harness the power technology has to improve the delivery of public services to people everywhere. Kelly, thank you so much for coming on to Civic Tech Chat for this episode. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Great, thanks, Ryan. So my name is Kelly Taylor. I'm the director of the newly formed Colorado Digital Service. Much like other initiatives that you see in the federal government and across other states, the Colorado Digital Service is a group of product managers, engineers, and designers that come spend time working for the state in a digital tour of service. So anything from 6 months up to 2 years. The team works on the governor's top priorities, much like the U.S. Digital Service works on kind of agency's top priorities. We're 1 month in, and very exciting. We are hiring. We are starting to get some project work done. So it's been a great start.
As always, we like to start with why with the podcast as we get going into an episode. So what would you say is your personal why? You know, that thing that makes you want to get out of bed each morning to do what you do.
So for the last 20 years or so, I've been building software across a variety of different startups. I've been through several acquisitions. And most recently, my team and I were acquired by IBM Watson. So we spent a couple of years building APIs there and mostly around natural language processing and computer vision. And during that experience, I kind of was able to see across lots of different industries from healthcare to government. And I, began getting into things like open data. And at that time also just, in my personal life, just getting more kind of civic minded, more interested in government, more interested in how technology is impacting citizens. Found out about things like Code for America and these other initiatives that are out there. And I talked to Anish Chopra, who was the first CTO of the US government, and Susanna Fox, who is the CTO of Health and Human Services. And they pointed me towards the US Digital Service, which I had never heard of before. And the US Digital Service is a team that formed after the kind of launch and crash of healthcare.gov. There's kind of this famous story of that project. And, in that team, you moved to DC for a year and work on, hard problems in government. And I never thought about working for government before. I really knew nothing about the state government, really didn't know anything about federal government. I was looking to my children's like third grade social studies class, and they were, knew more about government than I did. And but I started thinking about it, and the idea of impacting citizens with the technology skills, the thing you've been doing your entire career, really appealed to me. So we decided to try it, and I thought it would be a 1-year thing and done, right? And it turned into this real love of the impact and the work. So, when you're working on these large problems in government, your work can potentially affect millions of people and improve their day-to-day lives. So that really, began driving kind of the next chapter of my work. So as I returned back to Colorado after my time in DC, this kind of passion for impacting citizens and for working in government continued, and that's what led up to the beginning of the Colorado Digital Service.
Are there any pieces of media, whether it's a video, podcast, print, or something else entirely, that's been especially inspirational or informative to your practice?
Yeah, sure. There's a couple of blog posts that I tend to talk about all the time. Just yesterday, I was mentioning the Managers and Makers famous post by Paul Graham, and also talking about Government 2.0 and Government as a Platform by Tim O'Reilly. Those are two that, for whatever reason, throughout my last couple of years now, from the U.S. Digital Service and now the Colorado Digital Service, I just seem to talk about that over and over. For people that are interested in what's happening in the civic tech scene, places that I really, spend a lot of time with people that are interacting in these places, and like, conferences and so on, is Code for America, which I mentioned before. So the Code for America yearly conference is like really the center for civic tech, the premier civic tech gathering. So that's in DC this year in March. And, just really following that community on Twitter and places like that is where I spend a little bit of time to kind of follow along. The opposite side of the coin is local government and local politics. So I, for example, subscribe to Colorado politics, like all about the local scene here, and that just helps me stay informed of what's going on. It's really interesting going from federal to state, because the state, especially here in Denver, especially around the Capitol, it quickly becomes a very small community. You get to know the state representatives and the state senators and various people, the heads of the agencies, very quickly, because you're running into them on the street. And, so I feel like as you start to work in this area, just like in a large enterprise, you build up your network to help you get things done. The same thing in state government, where you really need to build up your network to get things done. And a big part of that is understanding kind of what's happening in the news. What does the budget look like for the next fiscal year? What are the priorities of the executive branch and the legislative branch? Also here in Colorado, we're a very a purple state. So you have, and when it comes to technology, a very different state. So you have agriculture and farming and oil and gas in the rural settings. You also have rural settings that have ski towns and tourism. And then, all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the Denver Boulder corridor, which is, closer to a San Francisco than a mountain town. So, these issues that impact our state really vary widely, especially when it comes to technology. So those are, following along kind of the national civic tech scene through a Code for America, and the local political and state tech scene is kind of how I approach it.
I imagine coming from a practice role like product management and transitioning to a director position is something that would take a bit of adjustment. What has that experience been like for you so far?
So my experience at the U.S. Digital Service was actually quite refreshing, because it is just about the work and nothing else, especially when you come in as a member of a community practice. So my work in DC last year was with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, building an API called the Blue Button API. And all I thought about day and night was this API, the developers using the API, the Medicare beneficiaries, and the applications they'd be using that were empowered by this API. And it was quite refreshing, because there was really nothing else, or not much else to think about, which I loved that. Building the new Colorado Digital Service team, of course, things are quite different, where we're very focused on building this great talent pipeline. After Governor Polis announced the team last month, we've had hundreds and hundreds of applications for our first 4 positions. So it's been really about applying product thinking to our talent pipeline. So understanding what's working, understanding what's driving interest, understanding how we can scale out, the various steps in the pipeline, like resume reviews to our technical interviews to our EQ interviews and so on, automating that. And from talent pipeline to really working on our specific project work, which is just getting started with a project called HR Works, to building up connections in the network within the state government. The Office of Information Technology here in the state has about 1,000 people. And that office really provides kind of support all across the government. So we work very closely. All these things, kind of have to work together to get the team started. There's also a lot of education early days here, educating and talking with legislators, talking with executive directors, and understanding how the state can continue to draw in engineers and product managers and designers that are interested in coming to help the state for 6 months up to 2 years.
Moving now to the main topic of our conversation, the Colorado Digital Service itself. Let's also start with why to frame this as well. So what would you say is the why for the Colorado Digital Service?
In my time in DC, again, I was all brand new to this type of stuff, the government work and getting things done in government that really impacts citizens. And, I was so just impacted by that experience that as I was thinking about coming back to Colorado, I started talking to different people that I was meeting in the Colorado state government, mostly through my work at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. That agency in the federal government, has a lot of overlap between the federal and state government because of Medicaid. And so I was talking to lots of folks in the Colorado government working on Medicaid, and just telling them what I was up to and how great it had been, and really kind of changed my life, and how Colorado was right for a team like this. We have Colorado and the Denver Boulder corridor is really the second headquarters for lots of tech companies, from Slack to Microsoft to Apple to Google. All the tech companies, Strava, like they have offices here, and it's really, the tech scene is just thriving. So that's a really kind of great foundation for talent to go help out in government for a little while. We also have a really strong university system here and a really strong startup ecosystem. So you can imagine, as I was coming back to Colorado, the way I was thinking about this is, startups that are failing, great engineers that are looking to take a leave from their company or are ready for maybe the next challenge. Like, this is a type of talent that is ready to come solve some of these super hard problems. In conjunction, a lot of the work that I was doing in DC was all around things like health data interoperability, these problems that need really a strong technical aptitude, but also this really high EQ to be able to get things done, a real good understanding of policy and serious things. So the type of talent that needs to come in on a digital service team is really senior, right? And been through these problems before in large enterprises. So kind of wrapping all that together, plus my experience, I was, really excited about, a team forming here. We, I mentioned before that I'd gone through Techstars years ago, and Governor Polis was one of the co-founders, along with Brad Feld and David Cohen, of the Techstars Accelerator. Governor Polis is a tech entrepreneur, and so the conditions just seemed right, for this team forming. Also, when you look across kind of the national landscape, it's been 5 years since the U.S. Digital Service formed after healthcare.gov. There's digital service teams all around the world, from the UK to Argentina. Estonia is well known for their digital service efforts. And here in the US, state digital service teams are also forming. So you see Governor Newsom in California has made a huge investment in their kind of innovation and digital service efforts. The state of Georgia has a digital service team. There's new teams that are formed in North Carolina and New Jersey and Connecticut. Massachusetts has a team. So this is, this trend has been happening across the US. And I think the reason that it's happening is bringing talent in from the private sector into government doesn't necessarily say that there's not great talent in government, because there is great tech talent even in government, from the vendor community to the ecosystem players like Code for America and others that kind of wrap around government, to the agencies themselves. But introducing kind of private sector into government, giving them this interface to come in, it just levels up everything. So you're bringing in, cutting edge practices. So you're bringing in engineers that are, have been working CI/CD pipelines and deployment strategies for years and years and years. This is not something that's brand new to them, like it might be on a government team. Some government teams you see are, they're beginning their agile transformation. They're beginning to think about their API strategy. So you have people that that can come in that have been doing this for, decades, right? And so it's a way to really accelerate some of the learnings by bringing this type of talent in to work alongside the civil servants.
For listeners out there that might not be super familiar with the model of a digital service team that we've been talking about here, how would you describe that model and what makes it a unique structure?
So the digital service model, at least here in the U.S., I don't know if it was invented by the U.S. Digital Service, but certainly tuned by it. The model is that you come into the government, you become a government employee, and the type of employee that you are has a term limit associated with it. So in the U.S. Digital Service, I think that began as a 2-year term limit. It's now 4. There's teams like 18F that is run out of the General Services Administration in the government, in the federal government. I think it's also a 4-year term. And the idea is that this is not a full-time career path that people joining digital service are looking for, but they are looking to make an impact, and they know that they have the skills that can make a difference, right? Whether they're an incredible product manager, we have a role we call bureaucracy hacker, which is maybe not the most technical software engineer in the world, but someone that's able to really get things done in a unique way. Engineers, designers. So, give them an interface into government where they can come in, make an impact immediately, work on high priority projects, whether it's what we call discovery sprints, prototyping, wireframing things, whether it's some sort of modernization effort where they're, taking functionality and helping move it from the mainframe to the cloud, or whether it's something like running a bug bounty or, scrubbing in and helping if there's some sort of, cybersecurity attack. It's things like that, right? And the model is to come in, make an impact, and then head back out to your, previous career path. Now, one of the things you see as people come in and get exposed to government for the first time is they end up staying and doing other impactful things in government. So we've had engineers from the U.S. Digital Service go on to become, CTOs or deputy CTOs of federal agencies, right? We now see, as I'm doing here in Colorado, U.S. Digital Service alumni start state digital service teams. And so, that's not everybody that joins U.S. Digital Service. Most people, head back to San Francisco, head back to Boston and New York, head back to Denver, but some people do stay. So anyway, that model is very appealing, at least for me personally. If the pitch was, all right, go from, your 20-year career in startups and tech companies and join government now for the next 40 years, that's not something I would consider. Right. But this idea of, hey, do you want to move to DC for a year and work on a couple of really hard problems and then, go do your next startup or whatever, like that's really what I had in mind. And it really appealed to me. And as I talked to, tons of people across the civic tech landscape, they feel the same way, whether it's 18F, Code for America, U.S. Digital Service or State Digital Service team. It's very appealing.
And as far as the way that the Colorado Digital Service fits in, like as a puzzle piece, as it were, with the rest of government, how would you describe that structure? Like, what's the relationship like between this new agency and other parts of the state government?
It's a great question. So as I mentioned, Colorado has an Office of Information Technology, and that's led by the Chief Information Officer, Dr. Teresa Scissorick. And about a decade ago, Colorado centralized a lot of their, quote unquote, IT. And you can imagine that the economies of scale that are gained by centralizing, laptops and things like that, and data centers, and so the centralization of technology here in the state is really strong and doing awesome things. And so our team, this digital service, we are in the Office of Information Technology. I report to the CIO. the Office of Information Technology is within the executive branch. It's not an agency that stands alone. I think Colorado has 17 or 18 agencies, like the Department of Personnel Administration, Department of Transportation, Corrections, agencies like that. And so we really are within OIT, and our kind of charter, our mandate is to work on the governor's priorities. So I mentioned kind of the type of work that a digital service does, right? From a discovery sprint, being very early, all the way through to, helping with infrastructure, right? Modernization efforts. So one, good place that I think a state digital service can help is you see legislation passed in a state, right? You also see this in legislation and regulation in the federal government. So legislation's passed, regulation is created, and in the past, that's been treated as kind of a requirements document, very much a waterfall approach. Here's the legislation. Sometimes in legislation, you see specific technologies outlined, data standards, things like that, which is a terrible idea, by the way. So this kind of waterfall approach, a digital service team can help improve that by doing early prototyping, doing lots of user research, and that can help inform the policy makers, right, in their decisions. So a lot of the work that you see from digital service, whether it's a US digital service to state digital service teams, is saying, hey, let's go talk to a bunch of users. Let's show them some things. Let's get some more input. And that's just additional information that policymakers can use to help create this policy and guide things. So, those are some of the things that kind of we see and how we think that we fit in to this broader, huge enterprise technology, whether it's efforts and team across the Colorado government.
Could you talk a little bit about the experience you went through trying to advocate for that as you returned to Colorado to kind of get this off the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned I had met a couple of people that working on Medicaid things and for the state, and because I was involved in the healthcare data interoperability work at the U.S. Digital Service, and so began with a couple of just real lightweight conversations and a couple of phone calls here and there, and one meeting would lead to another. Every once in a while, people that I had met would say, hey, and they would send me people to talk to. They were interested in things like how to create efficiencies in government, how we are approaching, modernizing procurement and other things like that. And so that was, what I did while I was in DC. Being far away like that, it really, all the work really felt like it focused around DC. And although I was completely homesick and missed my ski season and all of that great stuff, most of my thinking was in DC. But as I moved back, then I began having kind of more face-to-face meetings with people. And, after the governor's election, really, we began talking to Governor Polis about this in a real way. Again, because we elected a tech entrepreneur as a governor, understands the power of a good engineering team, good designers, good product people, and the impact they can have on how citizens interface with government and the overall success of things. He really was supportive. So once that support came, we really looked to the network of kind of leaders in Colorado and beyond for additional advice. So, leaders in this area like Brad Feld, for example, a venture capitalist that's been a technology leader here in Colorado for many years. People like that we would talk to and ask for their advice on where things should go, and that was extremely helpful. Then, as the team, as we got really serious about doing it, I was introduced to Matthew McAllister. Matthew spent 5 years in the Obama administration, the Office of Science and Tech Policy. He worked for Megan Smith, who was the CTO at the time, other things. And she connected us this. Matthew really brings that, I mentioned the bureaucracy hacker. He really brings that understanding of budgets and legislation and getting things done in government. And I was bringing kind of the project work, the product management type of thinking to the table. Matthew comes from also the city of Denver. So we started working closely on this and started talking about budget and what the original team would look like. As the new CIO joined the Polis administration, we began working with her on truly understanding the team, because the team would, live under her, of course. And we did some kind of a unique thing, I think, for the beginning of a state digital service team, where she asked us to do a kind of a sample project, a quick discovery sprint. So we took a look at this new HR and payroll system here in Colorado, HR Works. And we had a volunteer team came together. So just friends of mine, there were these great software developers and designers and product folks here in kind of Denver and Boulder. We spent 2 weeks with the HR Works team, just doing some user interviews and really helping them understand, ways to become more efficient, right? And so we talked a lot about agile software development. We talked a lot about DevOps, a lot about kind of product thinking, product roadmaps, and that helped demonstrate the impact a digital service team could have and how it's a little bit different. And so after that project, I think people were pretty comfortable with the idea of, hey, Colorado should launch this digital service team, and it'll be a great way to get more and more people into the state government. And kind of after that, it was all about working with the legislature on the budget, and we had budget approved, a couple of months ago to start the first version of the team.
So it sounds like there were a couple of audiences that you had to win some buy-in from there. There was, I guess at the start, it sounds like you had to convince the governor's office. And then at a second stage, there was interaction with legislators for kind of the funding aspect of it. Are there any differences in techniques or approaches you had to take in kind of going through those conversations in those kind of two different areas?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you're exactly right. That was the path, I had learned a lot about the state budgeting process. For legislators, it was really about helping them understand, the purpose of the team, right? They have funded the Office of Information Technology. Why do we need a second team? Is there some risk of shadow IT or misalignment on things? And so we did spend time with the senators and representatives on the various committees. Colorado has a great committee here called the Joint Technology Committee. And, again, going from federal to state, it's really, everyone is very approachable. And we were able to really talk through kind of the strategy for this team and the why. And we really focused on the talent pipeline. It's this interface to government that the tech talent that is drawn to Colorado, they're not being reached by whatever channels have existed for a long time to be drawn into government. And that's no fault of the channel, it's just different, right? So the digital service is a way to talk to engineers and designers and product managers about spending time in government. Again, this tour service model is the key, because this is not a long-term career in government. This is a chance for people to leverage their skills and impact this state that they love to live in. Colorado's known for kind of this lifestyle first type of state, right? People move to Colorado because they want to live here. And then, they work at the various big tech companies or startups or whatever because of the ecosystem that's here. And so most people you talk to here are very interested in making Colorado as great as it could be. And so we talked a lot about that when we talked with the legislators, and the executive branch and Governor Polis, they were brand new to the state, their administration, and they were looking for ways to optimize and improve performance, all the way across, as you can expect, right? I mean, all administrations are always looking to do that, but there's something about, a brand new start, fresh start. And so they got it right away. And the conversations there were very collaborative because we both had the same exact goals, and the digital service is just one small piece of this overall puzzle to help them drive these performance improvements across the state.
And as you were going through this process of advocating for digital service, were there any lessons that you learned along the way that you'd be willing to share with us?
Yeah, it's, each digital service team, whether it's Colorado, New Jersey, or California, or New York, or Georgia, they can have their own origin stories. So the big lesson, I think, in the Colorado digital service origin story was this discovery sprint project that we did. At first I thought it wasn't a great idea to do this, and I was worried we wouldn't be able to be successful, and not the right structure, just kind of this volunteer group of people helping out. But that really proved to be the thing that helped form these really good working relationships, it built up trust, and it was just this like really good experience all the way around. And it helped me understand really the culture of, building software within government, because we got to interact with an agency and the Office of Information Technology. And it was one of those things that when we finished up that discovery sprint, I was so excited to start the digital service, and I knew it was going to happen. The confidence was very high. So a piece of advice there and a learning is don't be afraid to take on that type of, show, don't tell attitude of, we were talking about all this great tech talent in Colorado. And so the CIO said, all right, well, show us, show us this great tech talent and how they, how they're going to rally around and help. Also, I'd say another piece of advice is really get to know your local civic tech community. So we have a very strong Code for Denver chapter, a brigade here, Code for Boulder. There's lots of things going on. So as we began this effort, really just every day led to another like amazing person that I would get to meet that was drawn to what we were starting to talk about. So we would do things like just have these very informal lunches. We just did one the other day. We built up a list of people that we would just give a quick email to saying, hey, here's a couple of things that is going on with this Colorado service effort to try to build this team. And by the way, we're having a lunch next week on this day. Come join if you can. So that was extremely helpful for building kind of a group of people here in Denver, at least, that were just always thinking about how to help and talking about the team. So it's things like that. Really, I would advise, states starting their digital service to leverage.
I imagine, as a young digital service, you're probably looking at the things in state government. It's a big space. It's probably a ton of potential things they all could step in and kind of help optimize, to use a word you mentioned before. Are there any spaces in there that you're maybe more excited or particularly excited about kind of taking a peek into with your team?
So I mentioned, kind of the types of work from discovery sprints to modernization efforts to bug bounties and so on. So that's a good way to think about the overall work. It's these different categories. Digital service teams differ a lot. So in Colorado, our digital service team will never own and operate anything long-term. It's very much like a come in, scrub in, help out, create momentum type of team, right? Where the Office of Information Technology and the vendors and the agencies themselves, they run the services long-term. Georgia Digital Service, Massachusetts Digital Service, for example, those two teams, they run and operate services long-term. So that's kind of another thing to think about. So when we look at our projects on the horizon and the type of work we're doing, I don't know specifically what it'll be since it is the governor's priorities. But I do see trends that are happening in the US. So I mentioned Tim O'Reilly's Government as a Platform and Government 2.0 blog post from 2009, right? It's kind of this core read for anyone in civic tech. One of the things that I've seen is for the last 10 years or so in government, it's been about this consumerization of the government experience, right? I want to be able to pay my parking ticket online. I want to be able to find the hours of my local rec center on my mobile device, right? Government should be have a good user experience, right? Things like that, right? That's all been happening, right, over the last decade. One of the things that you see, an example of kind of the next chapter is this project Quality Payments Program that I worked on when I first got to the U.S. Digital Service. It's this program under the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid where physicians report quality metrics to the Centers for Medicare, and their payment is adjusted based on these quality metrics, right? So this program, it used to be where physicians would go to a website and upload information, but we built an API for the program. So now companies are able to do these integrations between a hospital's electronic medical record system and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, and everything becomes very automated. So that's one example of kind of this next chapter I'm seeing of the role of APIs in government, right? And the role of transacting with citizens and businesses in the community beyond just a consumer experience. So another kind of signal of this is the open data movement I mentioned earlier, right? So when you go to state and local governments, federal governments, everyone has a data portal. Most of these data portals, you're able to access these open data sets using API, of course. You see APIs I mentioned before, like the Blue Button API that gives third-party application developers access to Medicare beneficiaries' health data, given the beneficiary's consent. You see more and more kind of interoperating between agencies to create a better consumer experience. So this next chapter of states having developer portals, providing developer documentation, managing API keys, making data available that was not previously available. All of that will lead to this kind of next chapter of innovation, whether it's around healthcare data interoperability, where schools and healthcare providers are sharing information so they know that that a student is sick or that they're having trouble in school, and that might lead to mental health concerns or something like that, or if it's transacting with government on the horizon. So when I think about what's really interesting to me, that's kind of one place I go. And then the second place I go is just really continuing improving the citizen experience. So here in Colorado, we just launched the My Colorado app that has a digital ID. So the experience is you download the app, you create an account, you take a picture of the front and back of your driver's license, some sort of magic happens in the background, and now you have this digital ID on your phone. And the joke is, oh, can I use it at a bar or whatever? And there's like places you can use it and places that you can't yet. Like you can't use it at the airport, for example. But it's the beginning of this, another big thing that's going to happen over the next decade around identity and just this streamlined mobile, such a good citizen experience. So those are kind of two big areas that I've been thinking a lot about when it comes to the, what's on the horizon and hopefully what the digital service can help with.
So folks listening to this that have liked what they've heard so far, might be wondering if you're looking for folks to sign on. And if that's the case, what are some qualities of someone who's likely to be successful in a digital service like this one?
Well, one of the really cool things about this tour service model is digital service teams are always hiring, people are always starting, and people are always leaving. So I remember my first week at the U.S. Digital Service, the first big staff meeting with Administrator Matt Cutts. That one of the traditions is this clap off to say goodbye to people that had been there a while. And I remember just being really nervous, like, wow, the people that were being clapped off were a couple of just awesome engineers, and being like, oh my gosh, they're leaving. Like, why are they leaving? It was an interesting thing to get used to, people always starting and people always rolling off. But that's the nature of the tour service model, and it keeps the talent pipeline really strong. So people that are really interested in kind of civic things, right? A lot of engineers and designers and product managers I talk to, they have ideas about how to improve their local community. They have opinions on things. They have, their empathy is just off the charts, right? They have lots of ideas. So that's the type of person that, if that's how you're thinking, you're drawn to it, then you'll be very successful on a digital service team. The other interesting thing to really think about is digital service team, especially for engineers, is you are not writing code 24/7, right? A lot of this is helping bring ideas and people together. I mentioned, the intersection of policy and software development. So we have this phrase, the U.S. digital service, like, this is a really weird job, and it's very true. So the type of person that is very comfortable in the middle of kind of chaotic environments, able to create momentum, move things forward where maybe other people can't see it. I mean, that's the type of person that's a great fit for a digital service team. And of course, here in Colorado, people can go to colorado.gov/digital service to, connect with us. And we're constantly hiring, building the first version of the team right now. So if you're a site reliability engineer, a designer, a product manager, a full stack engineer, security engineer, we are very interested in talking with you.
As always with Civic Tech Chat, we like to leave space at the end of our segment to allow the guests time to give us what their concluding thoughts might be. So Kelly, what would you like us to leave this conversation thinking about?
Well, I'd like everyone to think about how Colorado has 300 days of sunshine, world-class skiing, a thriving tech ecosystem, and a great place to live. So come and visit, and come and connect with us at colorado.gov/digital service. I'm super interested in hearing from you. My experience at the U.S. Digital Service, and now getting the opportunity to launch this new Colorado Digital Service, it's been by far the most impactful, wonderful part of my career. I encourage anybody that's thinking about this at all to at least check it out. I never ever imagined I would do anything related to government, and here I am now, a couple of years later, just continuing to have fun every single day. So definitely connect with us and check it out.
Great, Kelly. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us here on Civic Tech Chat.
Great. Thanks, Ryan.
You can follow us on Twitter using the handle @CivicTechChat. Visit us on the web at civictech.chat, or subscribe to us for content updates wherever it is you download your podcasts.